Good evening to all of you.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. I've been in the country now since Wednesday, and I must commend you for the warm reception that I have had. As I speak now, it appears I'm getting requests from almost everywhere in the country, but I have just a few days. So it's good to be here, and it's good to see the enthusiasm with which Ghanaians here in the United States, particularly within Virginia, Washington area, want to know more about their country. It is also important because when you travel as people who have been entrusted with the mandate of the people to work for their benefit, that you get feedback from your citizens who live outside the country. So the last few days I've had the opportunity to interact with a couple of Ghanaians. A few days ago I was on Kelvin's program, and I had the opportunity to have questions being posed to me from Ghanaians across not just United States but across the world. And it was a privilege to be able to speak directly to their concerns and to let them know what was happening in our country. Again, this is a private visit, but even though it's a private visit, our work is said that we don't have holidays. When you are asked to serve people, there are no holidays. And for every politician, when you travel outside your country and you have the opportunity to address issues back home, that is a huge privilege that you cannot turn down. So I would like to thank all of you for the special effort to create this platform so we could engage the people of Ghana, and indeed to engage everybody who is interested in knowing what is happening in Ghana. At the moment, the concerns that we have back home require some higher diplomatic and international attention, because we do have a president who lives and acts like the king Nebuchadnezzar that we all knew. He won't listen to anybody, and even when things are going bad, he doesn't think that there's a need for him to pay particular attention to what the opposing views are. And the country is as good as the collective views of the people, whether they are for or against the government. And often it is the opposing views that shape the country. As for the views that are in favor of government, those views are told every day. But when you have the opportunity for the opposing views to be heard, and you listen to them carefully, you will find within those views very instructive alternatives that can be pursued to improve the people. Unfortunately, we don't have a president who is interested in listening to the opposing views. And so when we get the opportunity like this, we think that these kinds of engagements can help even his own party people who are outside to one day tap him and say, it is important to listen, because some of the things that we are hearing are not all negative. And here I would like to cite, for instance, an example of our educational system. Those of you who know Ghana's education system very well, you will notice that at the basic level, the private sector appears to be better at delivering education in our country. So even the teachers send their children to private schools. The politicians send their children to private schools. And often we do believe that the private sector provides better quality education at the basic level in our country. It has come to stay. The public sector is not making the appropriate, not just investment, but we haven't been able to find a way around how to manage public schools at the basic level in order that they can deliver the same quality that the private sector is delivering. And you come to the secondary school level, that is where government is the best provider of education in our country. So people go to private schools at the basic level, but you find that at the secondary school, they all end up in the public schools because the government is better at delivering secondary education than the private sector in our country. Then at the tertiary school, at the tertiary level, it used to be the government was a dominant provider, but the gap is now being bridged between the private sector and the public sector. So unlike those days where if a student didn't get University of Ghana or KMUST or Cape Coast, the student was worried. Today, that student is happy to go to any private university. And when they are being engaged for employment, there doesn't seem to be a discrimination between those who were trained in our public universities and those trained in the private universities. And it is for this reason that whatever happens at the public secondary schools, we must be worried, because it appears to be the only area where government has an advantage. Unfortunately, we took a decision to implement a very important policy that has future implications for our children and for the quality of manpower that we'll produce tomorrow, which is the free SHS concept. So in 2016, during the election, there were two key views about how to pursue this policy. One view was that we needed to ensure that we identified very poor students and provided bursaries that will allow them to access public education, whilst the government spent a chunk of the money in order to provide the infrastructure and enabling environment to absorb more students. And once you are able to do that, and you are capable of providing the appropriate environment, you could then scale up to provide every child free education. There was another school of thought that said, no, we can't wait to do this. So we want to provide free SHS for everybody, even if they will sit on trees to learn. Unfortunately for Ghana, the second view won the debate because they were entrusted with the mandate to rule our country. And today we have introduced a major social intervention, which is free secondary education, which is good because our constitution itself envisages free education at the secondary school level. But what has happened is that we are providing free education that is compromising the quality that the government used to be touted for. So after 3 years, you started with first years, you moved to second year, you've moved to third year. The numbers are growing, students are struggling to even get the right environment to learn. And for a government to have been sleeping for 3 years without adding even one secondary school to the stock that it came to meet is a disaster. It's a disaster because we have seen the problem stare us in the face. We have introduced what we call a double track system, which is making our students have less contact hours with their teachers. Our children are spending less time in school than they used to spend. Now children go to school 6 weeks, they're back home. And I recall that we used to be in school for 3 months, even at a very older age. And we're still struggling to cope with the demands of quality education. Now they come to school for just 6 weeks and they're back home. Then another group of people take over for another 6 weeks, they come home. And so gradually the secondary school that used to be the source where government provided the right quality education is also beginning to lose out. The only reason why the private sector is not taking advantage of this is because it is free. Otherwise, if it wasn't for free, I can assure you not many people would like to have their children in public secondary school as we speak, because they are not too sure about the quality that will come out in the future. Fortunately, you live in a country where you can understand the direction that quality education going into the future is about. Most of the countries across the world are producing children that will be computing bad children. They are taking about artificial intelligence, they are taking about robotics, but our children are struggling to read a textbook that was produced 25 years ago. But most importantly, they don't even have the right environment to learn. Some are learning under trees, and when you say, they will tell you, I prefer to give my child education under a tree than not give the child education at all. That would have been acceptable in the first year of introduction of free SHS. But you cannot continue to keep the children under trees for 3 consecutive years without adding one secondary school to the stock that you met. And that for us is a bigger concern for the future. Will our children in future be able to compete with the rest of the world? Will our children come to the United States and be accepted into the United States schools? And even if they did, will they excel the way they have excelled over the years because they were properly prepared back home before they got here? Now, we are not preparing them well. Government, realizing that this is going to be a disaster, has decided instead of training the children to be producing past questions for the children to just study. So they could set questions that are familiar to the students and the students would have answered them and passed the exam. Just to make the point that they haven't failed after all. But just learning past questions and passing exams doesn't give you the foundation that you require to move forward. And that is a disaster for everybody, whether NDC, MPP, or PNC, because this is about the future of our children. And so when we get an opportunity like this, we will want to have a much stronger voice. A stronger voice that says, yes, we want free SHS, but we cannot compromise quality for free. And it is something that is already happening in our country. And anytime you mention the fact that you want to review the system and improve it, they equate review to mean abolition of free SHS. So when His Excellency John Dramani Mahama said he would like to review the free SHS system, refocus it, and make it better than it is today, they go to tell people that if you vote for him, he's coming to scrap free SHS because he says he wants to review it. But I don't know where in literature that review is the same as cancellation. So we need to send a very strong voice that we cannot play with the future of our children. And especially in a country where it is difficult to create jobs, you need more creative problem solvers and innovative children to come out of our schools so they can find a way to think outside the box and create opportunities for themselves. It doesn't seem as if we are heading in that direction. But when a country is governed by a 76-year-old man who wants to be in power until he is 80, and he will be ruling over a population for which over 50% of that population is under 40, then there's a crisis on our hands. Because he still thinks of the good old days. There cannot be anything good in the old days. In a modern society, the good should be in future. And so when a country continues to talk about good old days, then we are decades behind the rest of the world. And I have a very strong challenge when I hear that he wants to be the president again for another 8 years. It is not for any reason that we are asked to retire at the age of 60, because we believe that we have exhausted a lot of our capacities and energies and even our faculties. And it is for the reason we are supposed to exit office at 60. And you are 76, everybody can see nothing is happening. And now he wants another 4 years. Just like Mugabe, if he hadn't been overthrown, I'm sure he would have died on the throne. We cannot continue to have somebody who should be giving way to younger generations to think about themselves, continue to lead our country nowhere. And if you lead a country at 78, 79, you can only lead us to the grave where you belong and not to the future. And I think that it is for this reason that every Ghanaian ought to stand up. The second challenge we have in our country today is about a government that is very strong at PR, public relations, use of the media, and the crafting of the appropriate messages that are not consistent with the reality. So when the government is struggling to deliver 3 square meals to the people and livelihoods are lost and the people are getting poorer and poorer every day, they have a very clever way of communicating what is the direct opposite of what we're experiencing. So today, everybody will hear that in 2017, Ghana registered the fastest growth in the world, which was 8.1%. But if you ask and you go in to look at exactly what the growth drivers were, what led to that growth, you will find that that growth was generated by just a few non-Ghanaians who whose investment in our country have created a bigger income, which is not available to Ghanaians. So you find that the oil sector, which is basically an investment by foreigners and doesn't stay in our country, and a lot of Ghanaians not being involved in that sector, contributed about 80% of the entire industrial growth of our country. So when you find a country dependent on oil, to the extent that you have 80% of the entire industrial growth being influenced by oil, you ask yourself, how does oil growth create jobs for Ghanaians? It doesn't. So you are having to then look at an economy that has grown essentially because your GDP, about 4% of that GDP, belongs to oil. About 4% of that GDP that you are proud of belongs to mining and quarrying. And in the mining sector, the gold mining companies that we have in our country that are exploiting our natural resources are not Ghanaians. Ghana's total stake in the mining sector is about 5% of the entire output. So when you generate 30% of industrial growth coming directly from mining, such as Adongo, gold fields, and the rest, and 95% of that is owned by foreigners, then that income doesn't create jobs for Ghanaians, and it doesn't actually add to the standard of living of Ghanaians. Now you find that another major contributor to our growth is coming from technology, ICT. And the ICT sector is driven largely by the telecom companies. So you find that the companies such as MTN, Vodafone, Airtel Tigo are contributing over 75% of the growth in the ICT sector. That money doesn't stay in our country because they repatriate them in dividends and they take them outside of our country. And not many Ghanaians directly benefit from that. So if you strip all these off and you want to ask the basic question, so what were Ghanaians doing in terms of the total income that we have, then you find that there's a major problem. One, you will find that the agriculture sector is continuously declining, that an agriculture sector that even in 2017 was doing about 4.7%, today is doing about 2.1%. So the rural farmer is getting poorer and poorer. Cocoa production that we left at somewhere around 980,000 metric tons has come down to about 800,000 metric tons. So clearly our cocoa farmers aren't earning more money and they are getting poorer and poorer. You find that the fishery subsector is now doing a negative 17% growth. So Ghanaians living at the coastal line and rely on fishing for a living are getting poorer and poorer. Then you will find that for services, the key area of services that you find Ghanaians very actively involved is also going down. So repairs of vehicles and the sale of vehicle parts like you find with Abusoka and the rest is registering negative growth. You will find that construction that engage artisans in Ghana, such as masons, such as carpenters, and electricians and all of that, is registering negative 8% growth. It's actually contracting. So what it means is that these people are now staying at home and they don't have work to do. Now you find that the mining sector is also registering, and the financial services sector, including banking and insurance, has consistently been registering negative growth. And the projection by the government is that it will take up to 2026 for Ghana to begin to register a positive 1.13% in the financial sector. So clearly, financial sector that used to create the better jobs has become a death trap for employees. So we speak today, over 50,000 Ghanaians that were earning good money are at home and they have no jobs to do. So you can keep counting all this, and all this contribute to what we call the non-oil growth. That is the growth attributable to those growths that create job opportunities, those that put food on the table of Ghanaians are doing so bad. It said that even in 2016, in the face of Doomsday and all the challenges, the non-oil growth by Ghanaians was about 5.1% growth. For the past 3 years, the highest we have recorded is 4.8% growth in the non-oil sector. So we are really relying on oil sector. And what that means is that, you see, the oil sector, these foreign investors who put their money in Jubilee Fields, 10 and the rest, you can put any dunderheader as the president, they will still come and produce and maximize their investment and take it out. So oil will always register a positive growth, even without a sensible president, because these are private sector investments, and they will not let their investment go down because the president sitting there doesn't know the direction of the country. So we are beginning to see a very deteriorating Ghanaian economy. And often what they will do is to say they inherited an economy that was growing at 3.4%, and it was 8.1% in 2017. It came down to about 6.3%. Now they are projecting 6% growth. But even in that growth, you are beginning to see a downward trajectory in the growth. And that growth of 3.4% that they talked about was because in 2016, the only oil field we had at that time was at the Jubilee Fields. And the FPSO had a major challenge with what we call the turret belly, which holds it in place for it to be able to extract oil and to ship oil out. So for 6 months, Ghana was not producing oil from the Jubilee Fields. And then the price of crude also fell significantly on the world market. So the two put together ensured that the oil sector registered a significant drop in growth of about 17%. And everybody knows that when you do well with non-oil at 5.1, and you register a negative growth in the oil and mining sector of, say, about
Could you please go ahead? We can hear you. The number is not that large, so how else to fix it?
What I'm saying is that, so when we registered 5.1% growth in the non-oil sector, because we registered negative growth in the oil sector and the mining and quarrying, automatically it will drop, it will bring down your growth. So it's like a student who makes A's in the class for several of his subjects and gets a C in one paper. We know that your grade point average will be dropping because of that particular mark. So the 3.4% was as a result of the poor performance in oil and gas and mining, because gold prices have dropped so badly that you recall that most of the mining companies in Ghana had to shut down, or it didn't make sense to produce gold. And if you produce gold, given your cost and the revenue, you'll be running at a loss. So it was better to rationalize by reducing even the output. So mining sector, the oil and gas registered very significant reduction in growth, and we had about 17% negative growth in that sector. So that negative growth plus, we also recall that at that time we had this doomsday issue, and we found that we registered about negative 11% growth in the electricity subsector. These two items came together to bring down a good performance of 5.1% to 3.4%. So you may have a 3.4% growth that actually creates more jobs than 8.1% growth that is convoluted. We call it Koshoko growth. I mean, growth that basically the people don't feel it. Growth that the people in Makola markets are not contributing because nobody is buying their wares at Makola market as we speak today. They can't even generate the money that they were taking from microfinance companies, savings and loans, and the banks to buy their wares. Today, import in Ghana from 2017 to 2019 in an import-dependent economy like ours has dropped by about 25% because they can't even import. They can't even get the money to import the things, let alone to sell. And those who are able to import the items, nobody looking their way because people don't have money to buy anything. So you notice that if you have a situation where you are doing 3.4%, but the Ghanaian-driven growth at Makola market, women were very happy in 2016 because they were making money from the market. Now they don't. Those of you who have colleagues in Abosokai and Kumasi, how do you call that?
Swami magazine.
Swami magazine. They will tell you. And I heard and watched a video of a Ghanaian in Swami magazine who said that under the NDC, he could bring 25, 40-footer containers of spare parts from the United States, and he will sell them in 2 months. Now he brings just one container, and it takes him 6 to 7 months. And that if he's able to sell off this container, he will find somewhere, change them into dollars, and put the money in the bank account, and go back to Germany to go and hustle, because he can't afford, basically to waste his capital. So that person is going away with all the people who were working under him, because they also have to go home. Which growth will you prefer? So it is only in Ghana that a 3.4% growth was more job creating and providing more opportunities for Ghanaians than 8.1% growth. Since the oil sector growth began to dwindle, the government has not been able to raise up the non-oil sector growth in order to fill the void. And it is the reason you see our growth trajectory is going down, because the influence of oil after the first 2 years will no longer be felt the same way. So we have a bigger problem in our country of unemployment. People were already working in manufacturing, and you recall that up to 2016 we have done so, and manufacturing companies were struggling. Even then, we registered 7.9% growth in the manufacturing sector. Today, with our Adongo and all of that, our manufacturing sector is doing 4.1%. That is about 5% cut in growth. What it then means is that the manufacturing companies are not expanding enough in order to absorb Ghanaians. A company like Unilever, which for decades has been the leading light in manufacturing, registered its first major loss in 3 decades in 2018. And what Unilever is complaining about now is that when they produce their stocks, they have their route to the market, where they have key distributors and wholesalers who go to pick the items. The key distributors are not able to access loans in the bank, or refinance their existing loans in order that they can go and pick the stocks to come and sell. So key distributors are laying off workers because they cannot access credit to go and buy stock from Unilever. And for those who manage to go and buy, it takes them forever to sell their wares. The end result is that Unilever has now ended up putting all its working capital into stocks. So they produce, nobody comes to buy them. But they can also allow the most expensive state-of-the-art equipment they are using for production to lie idle. They must optimize that investment. Unfortunately, it's a catch-2 situation. To optimize that means you must find money to buy raw materials, pay workers, and all of that. You produce, it doesn't go to the market for you to get the money back and be able to, pay your workers and all of that. So Unilever is now just producing and stocking. The end result is that they made a very huge loss in 2008, which has never happened in 3 decades. And that is what is happening with our manufacturing sector. If a giant like that will go through this experience, it's not different from Nestle Ghana, it's not different from Accra Brewery, it's not different from Guinness Ghana Limited. They are all just living by because the economy is now in serious danger. People just don't have money, to buy anything, and therefore employment opportunities are not being created. So which one will you prefer? A 3.4 growth in an economy that was far better, or 8.1 growth in an economy that creates unemployment, joblessness? And it is because in 2016, the growth was coming from the most productive sectors of the economy that were relevant to Ghanaians. In 2017 to date, it's purely on account of oil, and that oil doesn't bring anything to our country. Now, we have also noticed that there is a deliberate attempt at managing our natural resource in such a way that Ghanaians are denied value from our natural resource endowment. So you notice that any country that discovers oil, because you don't have the expertise and it is the first time, your first oil agreement that you sign with investors, you are disadvantaged. Because you are so excited that you just want them to come and make you join the oil economy. And at that time, because you don't know much about the dynamics, you tend to lose out in many ways. So you recall that our first contract with tallow and the rest, we're getting just about 13%. That trend is supposed to reverse as you become more and more mature and begin to understand the industry. So subsequently, when we went to 10, the 10 fields, we moved from that figure to about 15%. By the time we're doing Sankofa Jinyame, we're doing 18% of growth. And by the time we signed the agreement with Aker AGM, Ghana had decided to set up a company called Esproco as a subsidiary of GMPC. So that GMPC does the regulatory work, but Esproco becomes a competitor to every investor who comes to invest in the oil sector. So that we use Esproco as our commercial arm in the oil sector, so we can also go and leverage for resources to come and then increase our stake in the oil sector. And that was a deliberate decision that His Excellency John Dramani Mahama took. So when we signed the agreement with AGM and Aker, we said that we want to take about 45% of that for Esproco. Now the first question you ask is, if you are giving 45% to Esproco, do you have the resources to match the investment that the foreigner is bringing? But because the oil they are coming to exploit is ours, we decided to stagger the relationship. So we said, the first requirement under the law is that you give us what we call the carried interest. Now what the carried interest does is that you are going to explore and to see whether you find oil. Until we find oil, we will not spend a penny, but you carry us along until you find that oil. But when you find that oil, and you are now coming to do commercial production at the development stage, that is when we need to contribute our quota to develop the fields and to exploit oil. So we were able to get about 30% carried interest for Esproco, and to now be contributing to only about 15% of the investment. Under President Kufuor, there was a company that was called EO Group. You might have heard EO Group. EO Group was given 3% carried interest. What it means is that EO Group was a partner in the fields who was not supposed to contribute anything until you get to commercial production, where they will bring money to develop the fields. The fact that you are being carried for free means that on a daily basis, you are generating value even though you are not putting money there. So by the time they find that oil, you can actually farm in your investment. When we say farm in, at the time they farm oil, the value of the oil fields that you have been carried becomes so high that your portion is enough for you to sell and get a lot of money, because you are not paying anything, but there is cost that is being incurred by the other partners. So at the time when we are about to develop Jubilee Fields, EO Group sold its interest for $300 million without putting one penny in the fields. Because once they were carried, if you are coming now to take that 3% or 1%, you have to remember that you have been incurring costs up to the point where they are selling it to you and they found the well. That cost, even though somebody incurred it for you, that is your value. So by merely being carried at 30% means that if at the point they found oil and they were now going to develop the site, we don't have money, we can actually go to the field and sell that 30% without putting one penny there and getting a lot of money. I don't know whether you understand what I'm saying. The NPP comes and they decide to scrap completely the carried interest that we were supposed to have for nothing. And after in the new agreement, Ghana's entire stake from 47 or 48% has come to 18%. And that 18%, our carried interest is just about 5%. When you ask them, they say Ghana doesn't have capacity to own that much. But you don't need capacity. It is an industry where the owners of the resource must be carried until it gets to a point where it makes sense to put money there. And if somebody is willing to spend close to about $3 to $4 billion without you putting in a penny, by the time they found that oil, that $4 billion, when they assess the oil find, and it is worth 20 billion, what it means is that technically you didn't do anything, but you are worth 30% of that 20 billion. I hope you are getting the point. So if at that point you don't have money to contribute, you look for an investor who has money and say, look, I have 30% of this oil find, and that 30% of that oil find amount to about $6 billion. I don't have capacity to contribute to the development. Or I can go to an investor or a financial institution and say, I want $4 billion to contribute to this investment, because in that investment, I have about $6 billion of it that I can sell now and take the money. But I don't want to do that, so I want you to give me $4 billion to go and invest in that sector. The worst case scenario is that you farm it out. The farm out is what I just explained. You go and say, I have 30 billion and 30% of this. The investment have been made to the tune of so much. When we do the assessment and the feasibility, the oil find is said that over a number of years, it will be worth about 20 billion. Calculate 30% of 20 billion, and that is what I'm willing to sell it to you. And Ghana would have gotten that money without spending a penny. Why that country will decide that I want only 5% is unbelievable. And like I said, they are creating PR around this and making the impression look as if Ghana is supposed to be contributing 47% of the investment up to the end. That Ghana doesn't need that. You are carried for free and you say, I don't like it. It cannot be for free that they have done that. So clearly, they and the investors are doing something that is very strange. And when they came recently to Parliament to do the amendment and were asked them, the answers they gave didn't make sense. In fact, Honorable Dominic Ayeni got up and asked the minister, are you here as a representative of AKE, or you are here as a minister of state paid by the state? Because you seem to be fighting for what is beneficial to the investor and not beneficial to Ghanaians. And that is where we are. We signed a stability agreement with Goldfields, Adongo Ashanti, when we were in power. When they came back, they brought the same agreement and they came and gave Adongo Ashanti more tax waivers. And Ghana now loses more from the tax waivers that we have gotten back. So there is a major problem with our natural resource governance under the NPP. The other problem that we have today, which we need to address, is a deliberate policy to destroy everybody other than their own. So they come to power, they say that Galamsey is destroying our waters, and it is our employ to take away that work and give it to themselves. So they decide to launch a project called Galamso, or whatever they call it, with the objective to clean the system of illegal mining. In the end, what we found was that they went and collected the excavators and machineries of those so-called illegal miners and sent those equipment